Good afternoon, scaredy cats. Hope you enjoy the video today and please like, comment, and subscribe.
1. The Haunted Cabin. A couple rented an Airbnb cabin in the woods, hoping for a peaceful weekend getaway. But as soon as they arrived, they felt an eerie presence in the air. Strange noises echoed through the walls at night, and ghostly figures appeared at the foot of their bed. They soon realized that they had unknowingly booked a haunted cabin, and that they were not alone in the woods. The couple couldn't believe their luck. They had been searching for a quiet and secluded cabin in the woods for months, and when they stumbled upon the Airbnb listing for this one, it seemed like it was too good to be true. The photos showed a cozy little cabin nestled in the heart of the forest, with a roaring fireplace and a hot tub on the back porch. They eagerly booked the cabin for the weekend and set out on their adventure. As they drove deeper and deeper into the woods, the excitement of their getaway began to fade. The trees seemed to grow taller and closer together, blocking out the sunlight and casting eerie shadows over the road. By the time they arrived at the cabin, they were both feeling a little uneasy. The cabin itself was just as cozy as they had hoped, with a crackling fire in the fireplace and soft blankets on the couch. But as soon as they settled in for the night, things started to get weird. At first, it was just a few strange creaks and groans from the old cabin. But then they heard footsteps in the hallway, even though they were the only ones there. They tried to ignore it and go back to sleep, but then they felt a cold breeze brush past them, even though all the windows were closed. The next morning, they tried to brush it off and enjoy the beautiful scenery around them. They hiked through the woods and had a picnic by the river, but they couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. That night, things got even worse. They woke up to find ghostly figures hovering at the foot of their bed, their eyes glowing in the darkness. They tried to scream, but no sound came out. The figures disappeared as suddenly as they had appeared, but the couple knew that they couldn't stay in the cabin any longer. They packed up their things and left the cabin as soon as the sun rose, never looking back. As they drove away, they both felt a sense of relief that they had escaped whatever haunted that cabin. They knew that they would never forget their haunted weekend in the woods. 2. The disappearing host. A group of friends rented an Airbnb apartment in the city for a weekend of fun. But when they arrived, their host was nowhere to be found. They soon realized that the apartment was a trap and that they were being hunted by a deranged killer who had posed as their host. With no way out and no one to help them, the friends had to fight for their survival in the killer's twisted game. The group of friends had been planning their weekend in the city for months. They had found the perfect Airbnb apartment in a trendy part of town, with plenty of bars and restaurants within walking distance. But as soon as they arrived, something felt off. Their host was nowhere to be found, despite their repeated attempts to contact them. The apartment was dusty and unkempt, with strange stains on the carpet and a strange smell in the air. As they began to unpack, they heard a faint sound coming from one of the rooms. When they investigated, they found a television playing a video message from their supposed host. The message was chilling and menacing, revealing that the apartment was a trap and that they were being hunted by a deranged killer. The friends were horrified and tried to leave, but they found that all the doors and windows were locked from the outside. Panic set in as they realized that they were trapped in the apartment with no way out. The killer had set up a twisted game, with clues and challenges that they had to solve in order to escape alive. They had no choice but to play along, hoping that they could outsmart the killer and find a way to escape. As the night wore on, the challenges became increasingly difficult and deadly. They found hidden objects and clues scattered throughout the apartment, leading them deeper into the killer's twisted game. They had to solve puzzles and riddles, all while trying to avoid the killer's traps and tricks. Some of the friends were captured and taken away, while others managed to evade the killer and continue on with the game. They were pushed to their limits, both physically and mentally, as they fought for their survival. Finally, after what seemed like an eternity, they managed to solve the final puzzle and escape from the apartment. They emerged onto the dark and deserted streets, shaken but alive. They had survived the killer's twisted game, but they knew that they would never forget the horror of that weekend in the city. 3. The possessed dollhouse. A family rented an Airbnb house for their summer vacation, but they soon discovered that something was terribly wrong. The children's dollhouse seemed to have a life of its own, with tiny footsteps and whispers coming from inside. As the days passed, the family realized that the dollhouse was possessed by a vengeful spirit and that they were in grave danger. The family had been looking forward to their summer vacation for months, and they were thrilled when they found the perfect Airbnb house for their stay. It was a charming cottage in a quiet, idyllic town, with a large garden for the children to play in. But as soon as they settled in, strange things started to happen. The children's dollhouse, which they had brought along for the trip, began to act strangely. The tiny dolls inside seemed to move on their own, and the family could hear faint whispers and footsteps coming from the dollhouse late at night. They tried to ignore it, chalking it up to their imagination, but as the days went on, things got even worse. The family started to experience other strange occurrences around the house. Doors would open and close on their own, and the temperature would drop suddenly, even on warm summer days. The family began to feel like they were being watched, and they started to feel an overwhelming sense of dread whenever they were in the house. One night, the family awoke to find the dolls from the dollhouse scattered around their bedroom. They heard a low, angry growling coming from inside the dollhouse, and they realized that it was no longer just their imagination. They were dealing with a vengeful spirit that had possessed the dollhouse. The family tried to leave the house, but they found that the doors were locked from the outside. They were trapped with the possessed dollhouse, and they knew that they were in grave danger. They turned to a local paranormal investigator for help, who confirmed their suspicions and advised them on how to banish the vengeful spirit. It was a long and terrifying night, but eventually, with the help of the paranormal investigator, the family was able to banish the spirit and escape from the house. They left the Airbnb and never looked back, knowing that they had narrowly escaped a horrifying experience. They knew that they would never forget the haunted dollhouse and the terror it had brought to their summer vacation. 4. The abandoned asylum. A group of thrill seekers rented an Airbnb property that was rumored to be an abandoned asylum. They were excited to explore the creepy halls and ghostly rooms, but they soon regretted their decision. As they descended deeper into the bowels of the building, they realized that the asylum was not as abandoned as they had thought. They were being watched by the ghosts of the asylum's former patients, and they had no escape. The group of thrill seekers had always been fascinated by abandoned buildings and spooky locations, so when they found an Airbnb property that was rumored to be an abandoned asylum, they couldn't resist the opportunity to explore it. They arrived at the property, a massive, decrepit building that had clearly seen better days, and began their exploration. As they made their way deeper into the asylum, they began to feel a sense of unease. The air grew colder, and they heard strange noises echoing through the halls. They found old medical equipment and restraints, and the rooms had a ghostly aura about them. But they pressed on, determined to uncover the secrets of the abandoned asylum. As they descended deeper into the bowels of the building, they realized that something was not right. They began to see ghostly apparitions, patients from the asylum's past, staring at them from the shadows. They could hear whispering and moaning, and they knew that they were not alone in the building. Panic set in as they realized that they were being watched by the ghosts of the asylum's former patients. They tried to leave, but they found that the doors were locked from the outside. They were trapped with the vengeful spirits, and they knew that they had no escape. The ghosts of the patients began to torment the group, appearing in the hallways and rooms with increasing frequency. They would move objects, make strange noises, and even touch the thrill seekers. It was a horrifying experience, and the group began to regret their decision to explore the abandoned asylum. As the night wore on, the spirits grew more aggressive. The group was chased through the halls, and they could hear the screams of the patients from the past echoing through the building. Finally, they managed to find a way out, but they knew that they would never forget the terror they had experienced in the abandoned asylum. The group left the Airbnb property, shaken and traumatized by the experience. They had learned a valuable lesson about the dangers of exploring abandoned buildings, especially those with a dark and sinister past. They knew that they would never forget the ghosts of the asylum's former patients and the haunting memories of their terrifying encounter. 5. The Demon House. A couple rented an Airbnb house in the countryside, but they soon realized that the property was cursed. Strange symbols appeared on the walls, and the air was thick with the scent of sulfur. They knew that they had to leave, but the demon that had possessed the house had other plans. It was not going to let them go without a fight. The couple arrived at the Airbnb property in the countryside, excited to spend a quiet weekend away from the hustle and bustle of the city. As they settled in, they noticed strange symbols etched onto the walls, and an unusual odor that seemed to linger in the air. As the night fell, the atmosphere in the house grew increasingly ominous. The symbols on the walls seemed to pulse with an eerie energy, and the smell of sulfur grew stronger. Suddenly, they heard a low growling noise, and they knew that something was very wrong with the property. They tried to leave, but the doors were locked, and the windows would not budge. The demon that had possessed the house was not going to let them go without a fight. The couple began to experience terrifying paranormal activity, from objects moving on their own to strange whispering voices that seemed to come from nowhere. They tried to ignore it, but the activity only grew worse, and they realized that they were dealing with something far beyond their control. They sought the help of a local priest, who performed a cleansing ritual to drive out the demon. But the demon was not so easily defeated. It fought back with a vengeance, throwing the couple across the room and hurling objects at them with incredible force. The couple realized that they were in grave danger, and they knew that they had to find a way out. They made one final attempt to escape, and with a great effort, they managed to break down the door and flee the cursed property. As they drove away, they saw the demon's shadow looming in the window, a haunting reminder of the terror they had just experienced. They knew that they had narrowly escaped with their lives, but they also knew that the curse of the property would haunt them forever. 6. The unsettling host. A solo traveler rented an Airbnb room in a quiet suburban neighborhood, but soon found themselves being watched by their strange and unsettling host. Every move was monitored, every word recorded. As the days passed, the traveler realized that they had stumbled into the lair of a psychopath who would stop at nothing to keep them there. The solo traveler arrived at the Airbnb property in a quiet suburban neighborhood, looking forward to a peaceful and relaxing stay. The host seemed friendly and welcoming at first, but as the days passed, the traveler began to feel uneasy. The host started to act strangely, watching the traveler's every move and recording their conversations. The traveler tried to ignore it, but the host's behavior became increasingly unsettling. The traveler realized too late that they had stumbled into the lair of a psychopath. The host was a disturbed individual who had no intention of letting the traveler leave. As the days went by, the traveler was constantly monitored, their movements and actions carefully recorded by the host. The host's behavior grew more and more erratic, and the traveler realized that they were in grave danger. The traveler tried to escape, but the host had made sure that all the exits were blocked. The traveler was trapped, with no way out and no one to turn to for help. The host's true intentions were revealed, and it became clear that the traveler was not the first victim to fall prey to the psychopath's twisted games. As the situation became more desperate, the traveler realized that they would have to fight for their survival. They gathered all their strength and cunning and launched a daring escape attempt, fighting off the host's attacks and managing to break free from their captivity. The traveler fled the Airbnb property and reported the host to the authorities. The host was apprehended and brought to justice, but the traveler was left with the haunting memory of their ordeal. 7. The Creepy Castle. A group of tourists rented an Airbnb castle in the Scottish Highlands, hoping for a fun and unique experience. But as soon as they arrived, they realized that the castle was not what it seemed. Ghostly apparitions appeared in the corridors, and the ancient portraits on the walls seemed to come to life at night. The tourists soon realized that they were trapped in a cursed castle, with no way out and no one to help them. The group of tourists arrived at the Airbnb castle in the Scottish Highlands, excited for a unique and thrilling experience. However, their excitement quickly turned to fear as they realized that the castle was not as welcoming as they had hoped. Strange things started happening almost immediately. Ghostly apparitions appeared in the corridors, and the ancient portraits on the walls seemed to come to life at night. The tourists tried to ignore it, But the feeling of being watched was constant, and they soon realized that they were trapped in a cursed castle. The castle's history was shrouded in mystery, and as the days passed, the tourists began to uncover its dark secrets. They discovered that the castle had been built on an ancient burial ground, and that its previous occupants had met a gruesome fate. As they delved deeper into the castle's history, the tourists realized that they were not alone. The ghosts of the castle's former inhabitants were still present, haunting the corridors and rooms. The tourists tried to leave, but the castle seemed to have a life of its own, with doors and windows that wouldn't open and walls that seemed to shift and change. They were trapped, with no way out and no one to help them. As their situation grew more desperate, the tourists realized that they would have to confront the curse head-on. They searched for a way to break the curse, studying ancient texts and performing rituals in a desperate attempt to escape the castle's clutches. Their efforts were eventually successful, and the tourists managed to break the curse and escape the castle. But the experience had left them shaken, with memories that would haunt them for the rest of their lives. 8. The stalker guest. An Airbnb host rented out a room in her home to a quiet and unassuming guest. But as the days passed, the host realized that the guest was not what they seemed. They had a dark and twisted obsession with the host, and would stop at nothing to make sure that they were never apart. The host started to notice that the guest was always around, even when they didn't have to be. They would follow the host around the house, constantly asking them questions and seeking their attention. At first, the host tried to brush it off as friendly curiosity, but soon they began to feel uneasy around the guest. One day, the host returned home from running errands to find the guest sitting on their bed, going through their personal belongings. The host was shocked and asked the guest what they were doing, but the guest simply smiled and said that they wanted to know everything about the host. The host realized that they had to take action, and so they confronted the guest about their behavior. The guest became defensive and insisted that they were just trying to be friendly, but the host knew that something was not right. Feeling unsafe in their own home, the host decided to ask the guest to leave. But the guest refused to go, saying that they couldn't bear to be apart from the host. The host realized that they were dealing with a dangerous individual and called the police. The police arrived and escorted the guest out of the house. It turned out that the guest had a history of stalking and had been banned from other short-term rental services before. The host was shaken by the experience, but grateful that they had taken action before anything worse had happened. From then on, they made sure to screen their guests more carefully and always trust their instincts. 9. The abandoned mansion. A group of friends rented an Airbnb mansion for a weekend of parties and fun. But as soon as they entered the property, they knew that they had made a mistake. The mansion was abandoned and decrepit, with rotting floors and peeling wallpaper. And in the shadows, something was lurking. Something that wanted to claim their souls as its own. The group of friends arrived at the Airbnb mansion, excited for a weekend of parties and fun. But as soon as they entered the property, they felt a sense of unease. The mansion was abandoned and decrepit, with rotting floors and peeling wallpaper. It was clear that the property had not been taken care of in years. Despite their reservations, the group decided to make the most of their weekend and began to party. But as the night went on, strange things started to happen. Doors would open and close on their own, and the sound of footsteps could be heard in the halls. As the days passed, the friends began to feel as though they were being watched. Shadows seemed to move on their own, and they would catch glimpses of something lurking in the corners of their vision. It was clear that the mansion was not as abandoned as they had thought. As the situation grew more and more unsettling, the friends realized that they were not alone in the mansion. Something was lurking in the shadows, something that wanted to claim their souls as its own. The friends tried to leave, but the doors and windows of the mansion were locked, and they were trapped. They knew that they had to confront whatever was haunting the mansion if they wanted to escape with their lives. They searched for clues, studying old records and ancient texts in an attempt to uncover the mansion's dark secrets. What they discovered was beyond their wildest nightmares. The mansion had once been a place of ritual sacrifice, and the spirits of the dead still lingered, seeking revenge on the living. In a desperate attempt to break the curse, the friends performed a ritual to banish the spirits from the mansion. And finally, after days of terror, the mansion fell silent. The friends managed to escape with their lives, but the experience had left them shaken. They knew that they would never forget the horrors they had experienced in that haunted Airbnb mansion. 10. The Vanishing Room. A couple rented an Airbnb room in a busy city for a weekend trip, but they quickly noticed that something was not right. The room they had rented seemed to disappear every time they left to explore the city. Each time they returned, they had to navigate a maze of unfamiliar corridors to find their way back to their room. As the days passed, the couple realized that they were trapped in a twisted dimension and that the Airbnb room was a gateway to a terrifying alternate reality. The couple arrived at the Airbnb room they had rented in the heart of the busy city, excited for a weekend of exploration and adventure. But as soon as they left the room to explore, they quickly realized that something was not right. Every time they returned to the building, the layout seemed to have changed. The corridors they had taken to get to their room had shifted, and they had to navigate a maze of unfamiliar halls to find their way back. At first, the couple thought it was just their imagination, but as the days passed, it became clear that something was seriously wrong. They were trapped in a twisted dimension, and the Airbnb room was a gateway to a terrifying alternate reality. The couple tried everything they could think of to escape, but every time they left the room, they were met with a new set of obstacles. The building seemed to be alive, shifting and changing at will. As they explored the building, the couple discovered that there were other people trapped in this alternate reality. Some had been there for weeks, others for years. They had all given up hope of ever escaping. The couple knew that they had to find a way out, but the building seemed to be alive and aware of their every move. They were being watched by unseen forces, and every time they got close to finding a way out, the building would shift and change, making it impossible for them to leave. Finally, the couple discovered the source of the building's power, a powerful entity that had been feeding off the fear and despair of those trapped inside. With the help of the other trapped souls, they were able to defeat the entity and break free from the twisted dimension. The couple emerged from the building, grateful to be alive and free. They knew that they would never forget the horror they had experienced, and that they would always be wary of the power of Airbnb rooms in busy cities.